Okay, I'm recording. I'm going to get this started tonight. Don't have many people here. Um, it is June 26th, 2018. This is the scheduled lecture on Tuesday night at 6 o'clock for ITSC 2309 at Collin College. Tonight we are introducing, excuse me. I regret that I'm down with a summer cold tonight and I need to close the door. Pardon. Okay, running a little hoarse tonight, but I think we can make it. Textbook reference for tonight is specifically 160 through 164. And we're talking about what we call the aggregate functions. The aggregate means we put a bunch of stuff together to get it. And there are 5 of them that are common. And these 5 are listed right here. So count takes the count of how many are in there that are not null. Sum adds up numbers. Minimum and maximum will work on text. It means the first or the last in the alphabet. And AVG is the average, and it also works on numbers. And here's a aggregate function video it's pretty good. So there are 5 of them, and there are others that are listed here. So they collapse many values into one, which is what Professor King talks about in this value. So if I said select count, invoice ID as my count, we would find we had 114 different values. So if you were to execute this, you would find that there would be 114 values in the field invoice ID. So those are the distinct values. If we had written count all, would consider duplicates. But invoice ID is the primary key. Excuse me, I'm having difficulties tonight. Sorry, I regret I'm fighting a summer cold tonight. So we're going to wrap this up fairly early, and I'll probably go ahead and try to get another one done tomorrow night. So how many unique values? So tell me the count of the unique values in invoice ID. If I said count all, it would not have considered duplicates as the same. Count does not consider null values. However, it cannot be null because it's unique. So I put down here, this is my example. If you were told to take a head count, do you really count heads? It's not necessary that we count the heads. So what I would say is when we just want to know how many records we have, we're going to say count star, count asterisk. The system does not have to go in and look at it. And it just counts the record. If there's a record there, it counts it. AVG, since some work on individual fields, and it has to have one valid number because I cannot take an average or a sum of no numbers at all. Problem begins when we write this. Select vendor city and the count. Now, if I said select vendor city from vendors, what would I get? So let's try it. I'm going to go ahead and copy this. No, I say I'm going to copy it. Well, There. Paste. Now, if this is this example of the first one. Excuse me. This one may be over more quickly than I thought. If I try to execute this, I say execute, and I say, wait a minute, it can't happen. Suppose I just said, let's comment that one out, and I just say, select vendor city from vendors. Okay. Now, when I execute this, I'm going to see a total of 122 different rows. Well, some of them are the same. Many of them have the same names in there. And so what am I seeing? I'm seeing all the vendor cities. Now, what if I said count? Count what? Will I see 1, 1, 1, 1, 1? This is supposed to be an aggregate. So if I try to do this, I am not going to get anything. If I try to execute this, it's not going to know what to count. It's not going to be able to collapse this into anything and give me a count, because so all I'm going to do is get this error message. It is not contained in either an aggregate function or the group by clause, which brings us up to the group by clause, I believe. And bring next window. The group by. New rule. If your select line contains an aggregate function, okay, does my select line contain an aggregate function? Yes, it does, right there. That's one of them. We have 5 of them that we're considering. Count is the first one I gave. So what was it? Count, min, max, average, and sum. So I have an aggregate function. If you're any selected field that is not an aggregate function must appear in the group by clause, no exceptions. Okay, so here is the correctly written query. Select vendor city count, and in this case I put the as CNT as I should have in the other one. I just knew this one wasn't going to run. Now, group by. So what does this say to do? Let's see what happens when I execute this. Notice that the cities all collapse, and where the cities are equal, it all collapses into one city. So Anaheim has a count of 2. Ann Arbor, Auburn Hills, Boston, there's 3 of them. I didn't say to order by any place. Looks like it's alphabetizing them by default, but that's fine. I can't count on that happening. And so notice I have 5 that are from Washington. I should have a whole bunch of them from Fresno. Yeah, 41 from Fresno. Guess where our publisher lives. Anyway, if there is an aggregate function, here is an aggregate function. There can be more than one. And there is anything that is not an aggregate function. Here is something that is not an aggregate function. There can be more than one. Then it must appear as part of the group by. There are no exceptions to this rule. We can group by multiple fields. And the example that I use, so I can group by city, state, from vendors. If I had I could have a where. I can do a table join here. In the first grouped query, I point out here that San Diego, California, and San Diego, Texas would appear in the same group, so they would be counted. So vendor city, San Diego, is just San Diego. As soon as I put the vendor state in there, now San Diego, Texas, and San Diego, California would appear in different groups. Most common mistake by students is that to have one or more aggregate queries, an aggregate query, and then have something that is not an aggregate and forget to put it in the group by. So if it's not an aggregate, here's this case, it has two of them, then both of them have to go in the group by. Excuse me, I don't know that I'm gonna go very long tonight. We're gonna try it a little farther here. Okay, any questions on the group by?
Somehow I'm not able to see the results screen.
Okay, the group by has another piece to it called the halving. And think of the halving like a where clause that applies to the group. Now, when I talk about where, it applies to individual rows that are returned. The where clause applies to the groups, to the records that are included in the groups. Now, many people place the halving clause on its own line. I usually put it on the same line as the group by because I think of this as the same clause. Now, many people will drop it down to the second line, and that's fine if you do that. So group by and then halving, but halving always comes immediately after group by. Let's look at one of them here. This is an example that has, well, if I can get it. Okay. This one is going to select vendor ID, average of something, and the count of records. So I have at least one aggregate function, and I have a vendor ID. Therefore, I must have a group by line. So select vendor ID, the average of the invoice total, and the count per vendor ID from invoices. And I'm only interested in where the invoice total is greater than 10. I just put this in here to show where the where clause would go. So it's select from where. After that comes the group by and the halving. And after that, the order by. So I can go order by AV, or I could go order by CNT. But notice that I can't put the having CNT greater than 1, I can't have I can't use CNT on the halving line. So when I execute this guy, okay, we're gonna wrap this up here faster than I thought we were. Vendor ID 95 has a total of 6 invoices, and that is the average. Vendor 123, I don't know, I guess that's FedEx or somebody, has 44 invoices. Their average is $98.82. And so on. And I could say which one's the biggest. So for example, 72, invoice vendor ID 72 has an average invoice total of over $10,000. They only have 2 of them, so they're pretty big. And notice that vendor 110 has an average invoice of $23,978. And 5 of those. So this is the way we can see some things about the totals. You may notice that we can use the field alias on the order by line That's the only line that's executed after the select. This is an example of one that has an inner join. We could have an outer join just as easily. Let's pull this one over and take a look at it in our okay, so I'm going to select the vendor name, average of invoice total, and the count. Well, if I have vendor name and invoice total, those come from two different tables. Therefore, I'm going to have an inner join in here. So I'm going to have invoices, inner join vendors. I still see some people writing join instead of inner join, and I'm going to send those back to you. If you write join, I'm going to send it back and tell you to correct it without writing inner join. Vendor ID equals invoice vendor ID, vendor ID. Invoice total is greater than 10, so everything is the same except I changed the vendor name. Let's see, there was one case on the last set of problems I gave where there was an inconsistency between what was printed, what was written into the into Canvas and what was actually saved as the file. And in the Canvas version of it, I said I wanted you to return the vendor name and the invoice number, and in the other one I said the vendor ID and the invoice ID. Now in the second one where I said vendor ID, you only had to hit one table, and since that's kind of odd because we were talking about, let me pull that one up. See, that was in the table join. That was in the assignment. And it said we will return the vendor name and the invoice number. But when you went over and downloaded the assignment in Word format, you were supposed to get it said return the vendor ID and the invoice number. And the only thing, the vendor ID and the invoice number can all come from the same table. That's all in the invoices table. As soon as I put the vendor name in there, anyway, I have corrected this in both of them, but I found that people were returning the vendor ID. So if I wrote something on your paper, I'm going to go ahead and accept the vendor ID, but I did change it. Okay, so here's as soon as I put vendor name is only in the vendors table, invoice total is only in the invoices table, therefore we're stuck with an inner join. But that's okay, so group by and having, work on that. The group by and having comes between the where, if you have a where, and the order by, so it comes after, so it goes select from where. Well, you have to have a select, you have to have a from, a where if you've got it, group by having if it comes next, and then order by. Okay, I regret that I am pretty much out of it tonight. What I'm going to do is I think I'm going to cap it off tonight just because I'm feeling so crummy. And I will be online tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. I'll make an announcement to that fact. I'm not going to cover new material at 6 o'clock tomorrow night, but I'm going to be online to take any questions. Anything tomorrow night at 6 o'clock. let's see, I'm going to be out of town for a little while tomorrow. I think I'll be back by 6 o'clock. I'm going to go ahead and set it for 6:30. So we're going to have a lab session at 6:30. If you can't be there at 6:30 and you want to participate, just tell me. I'll meet you whenever. For right now, I think I'm going to go ahead and cap this off just because I'm talking is kind of painful tonight. So as you can probably tell. Are there any immediate questions right now? Byman, you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
Somehow I wasn't here in the first 2-3 minutes.
Okay.
My screen was kind of messed up, so I couldn't see some of the things you were showing there.
Well,
I'll go through it before tomorrow night, and I may have questions.
Okay, I will be online tomorrow night. I'll post an announcement. It'd be 6 or 6:30. I'll post an announcement as to what time that'll be. Let's see. I've got the assignment up for Module 7, and I regret that I'm kind of out of it tonight. But I just, you know, how summer cold goes.
Yeah. Hope you feel better by tomorrow.
Okay, I'll see you guys tomorrow, and I'm going to go ahead and end the recording now.